Hi Jessica, Amy here. I first let me please apologize. I am very sorry that I haven't gotten you the feedback until today. This week has just kind of gotten away from me, as I'm sure you can imagine, so I'm very sorry. But what I can do is give you an extra 24 hours on the paper. I'll just open up the Dropbox for you a little bit longer, and that way it'll give you some more time to work on these revisions before it's due. If that's a problem, please let me know, but at least that way you're not rushing to get it in there by tonight. At least. I actually think your paper started out really strong. I was thinking, well, this will be really easy because I won't have to comment on too many things. But as I got a little bit further, I do think I can make some suggestions in terms of how you could structure your thesis a little bit more precisely, I guess is the way to say it, so that your body paragraphs could be just a little bit more focused. But in general, you're doing a pretty good job, especially with the counter arguments and with your proposal itself and the development of what you are saying should be done in terms of your call to action. I just think that you could do a little bit more to distinctly identify the problem points or the reasons why you believe that proposal should be enacted, because right now you've kind of grouped them all into the side effects of the conventional drugs. And while I do think that, of course, those are definitely problems and that's a good source of support for your argument, I think maybe you could be a little more specific about those side effects and come up with maybe categories of side effects or individual side effects that you could use, as I said before, to structure your body paragraphs a little bit better, instead of just referring to all the side effects generally in your thesis and in one paragraph together. So let me just get into this, and maybe what I'm talking about will become a little bit more clear. And then also, I know you mentioned in your email that you hadn't done a lot with the citations yet. You have a pretty good start actually, but I do have a lot of comments in here about ways that you could make your citations more MLA accurate, and also places where you need more citations. So let me check something really quick. Sorry, I just want to look. Well, one thing while I'm here that I want to point out is that you have all your works cited sources identified as print sources, and unless you actually went like to the stacks at CSU and found this journal in physical form, it's not really considered a print source even if it originally appeared in print. And so I'm assuming that you use the database to find a lot of these journal and university publications. And so if that's the case, you need to cite the database information instead of saying that it was a print source. So for example, here you would have the database title in italics. Say for example, it's Academic Search Premier. Then the word web, and then the date when you accessed it. So you can just ballpark it. If you don't remember the actual date when you read the article, you can just include here whatever the first day of that week, or just try to guess as closely as you can, because that'll give a sense of what version of it you were looking at in case it gets updated or revised later in any way. So, that was just kind of an aside. I'm sorry, I don't mean to distract myself. Let me get back to your actual essay here. And I guess what I was getting at is that in some of these citations, you will need to include page numbers. It's a little unclear from this particular citation if you were able to see what the page numbers are, but if you get the article, if you do get it in print, or if you get it in PDF off of the database, you should be able to see what those page numbers are, and then you would include those in the parenthetical citations as well. And then this is a space where you needed another citation, and actually I think this should be two separate sentences. I think you may just be missing a period here, and if that's the case, you have this sentence cited, but you would need to cite this one as well. So just a little bit of suggestion there in terms of how you can be more meticulous, but for the most part you're doing a pretty good job citing every single idea that comes from your sources. Okay, so here's where I got to your thesis. You do a really good job with surprising reversal. You sum up one general problem, which is the side effects, and then you say your proposal here at the end. And that's a pretty strong structure for your overall thesis, but I would say it's going to help you, again, develop your body paragraphs more if you actually list the side effects here. And of course, you won't be able to list every single side effect, but if you could group them into categories or individual points about the side effects, that would give you something to talk about in every single distinct body paragraph as you're supporting your argument. So I noticed, for example, that with several of the different drugs you mentioned sexual side effects, so maybe that could be one category. And then I also noticed you mentioned like sleep problems, some anxiety as a side effect, and those you could group all into mental effects. And then of course there will be some physical effects. So you might say something like something here like, although SSRIs are commonly used to treat anxiety, there are several side effects including physical, mental, sexual, etc., to consider when taking these medications. Therefore, natural remedies should be utilized as they can treat anxiety just as well and are a whole lot safer. And so here at the end of your thesis, you do a lot better job providing a couple of distinct reasons as to why you think the natural remedies are beneficial. So you'll have reasons kind of on the problem side in terms of what's wrong with the medications, and then also points on the solution side in terms of why natural remedies are better. But when we get to this point in your essay, you'll see that you're not actually following along with these 2 points here as reasons why natural remedies are better in terms of how you're structuring your paragraphs. So that's another suggestion that I'll make when we get to that point in your discussion. So that's kind of what I'm summarizing here. Here. And then also your proposal itself is that natural remedies should be considered, but that language I think is maybe just a little too vague and could be more precise in terms of what you mean specifically by should be considered. That's kind of just leaving it out there up in the air in terms of how exactly they should be considered. But what I would like to see is you be a little bit more precise in terms of who, what, when, where, why, those kinds of things. What actually should be done, who should be doing it, when, where, and why. So, this could go a couple of different ways. You might be thinking that doctors should be recommending natural remedies to their patients, or you might think that this is something that the patients need to take into their own hands and do on their own, or even ask their doctors about. Or you might think it goes to a much higher level than that, and that this is something that, for example, maybe the American Psychological Association should be recommending to doctors to recommend to their patients. So it really will depend on what you found in your research and who you think can really target the problem most effectively. But I think just stating it a little bit more specifically here in the thesis would help. Make it a little more persuasive, because there's research that shows that the more specific your proposal is, the more likely it is to be enacted. And when you're just kind of suggesting something generally, people are much less likely to actually do it. Okay, so you are using surprising reversal in your thesis, and you do a good job following along with that structure by discussing the counter argument first. So the benefits of what is currently prescribed, or the reason why people are doing this differently according to the status quo. However, I was a little bit concerned that that went on for several paragraphs, and I think this goes back to what I was saying about your thesis in terms of the side effects just being lumped together generally and not organized into distinct points, and also the fact that you're trying to refute the counter arguments kind of one at a time as they come up, whereas it can be more effective to kind of group the counter arguments together and reduce them to a more manageable few, and then refute them as larger categories as well, with what I'm saying should be developed as problem points in your thesis, which in this case would be those negative side effects. So what I think you could do is take out a lot of this stuff in the second half of both of these paragraphs, where you are saying, however, basically, they do have adverse effects. And just use this counter argument paragraph to really wallow in the complexity of that alternative point of view and talk about why SSRIs are currently the most commonly prescribed medications to treat anxiety. So what you could do then is just take again, the first two halves of these paragraphs and group them together, so that really what comes right after the intro there is just devoted to your explanation of the alternative point of view, not necessarily your refutation of that point of view. And the beauty of surprising reversal is that it basically just sets up your whole paper so that you give the alternative point of view in the beginning, and then you essentially use the rest of your essay to refute it. So if we did it this way, then you would just have one paragraph that's a counter-argument paragraph here that talks about why people, or excuse me, specifically doctors, are doing things differently than what you think should be done, why the status quo is to prescribe SSRIs. And that's going to kind of, again, group it together and make it a little more manageable, and it won't delay your progress in getting to your actual points and reasons as to why natural remedies are better quite as much. So you can see here it would go straight from your intro, including your thesis, into the counter-argument, which would be relatively confined and condensed, and then into the problem points that you're going to have, which are related to those side effects. And if we do this, you can see that starting here in the middle of page 2, you actually have just a ton of information about the different side effects. And this is where, again, I see the points to support your argument are getting kind of expansive, becoming a little unwieldy, because they're not organized according to kind of groups or categories, or what I would really call points, problem points, as to what you're saying is wrong with these SSRI medications. And what happens with a structure like this sometimes is that you'll end up accidentally repeating yourself. And so that's when I saw, when I was mentioning earlier that I think sexual side effects comes up in a couple of different places. I know that there are some motor, cognitive motor issues, and by motor I mean like movement or being able to control your own movement, side effects that come up with a lot of these drugs. I know there's a lot of mental effects that come up with the drugs, and so those are the kinds of categories that you can group these into as you formulate points as to why the current medications are a problem. And then that will kind of make you less likely to repeat yourself, because rather than organizing your paragraphs according to the problems with each individual type of medication, you'll have problems in general, and then the medications themselves are just examples of where that problem might come up. So hopefully that's clear. That's probably the biggest suggestion I have for your essay. And then you would also want to list those problem points, as I mentioned before, in your thesis. So side effects such as mental, sexual, physical, or whatever you decide those points need to be. And then, let's see, then you would just, it would be a matter of reorganizing. So kind of breaking up this information and pulling different sentences into the respective paragraphs that they would most apply to. So you may end up taking the headache stuff here and putting it in one paragraph, the nervousness, sleepiness, drowsiness, and anxiety stuff into another paragraph, the shaky, dizziness, weakness, stuff into another paragraph, if you for an example there. So let me know if that's not clear or if that's still confusing. And then, as I mentioned with your thesis, that kind of applies to the solution section of your essay as well. Here in the middle of page 4, you have a really good short transitional paragraph where you kind of sum up those problems with the side effects, and then shift to discussing your solution points related to the benefits of natural remedies. However, if you went back and looked at your thesis, the two reasons that you give why these natural remedies should be utilized is because they're effective and safe. And so I would want to see your paragraphs in your solution section following along with those points about effectiveness and safeness. So you do say that they can be used, but I would like to see you again recap those points, effective and safe, and then use them to introduce your paragraphs here. So one reason why natural remedies should be used is because they are effective, and then you can talk about passion flower, kava, hypericum, perforatum, or St. John's wort, in terms of effectiveness in that paragraph. And then your next paragraph would be about safety, and you might bring up all of these examples again as places where natural remedies are safer, but those points about effectiveness and safety should be guiding your paragraphs, not the individual types of alternative remedies themselves. And so that'll make it feel a little bit more informative than persuasive. Your conclusion's pretty strong, but you don't want to introduce any new information here. And then I had a few comments on your works cited as well, but I'll send you a link in the email that will help you too. So let me know if you have any questions.